In this video, I'm going to teach you how to execute a base block, which is a one-on-one block for offensive linemen and tight ends on the line of scrimmage versus a defender, a defensive line or linebacker who's aligned in an outside shade, but that's aligned very tight to us on plays that happen inside the tackle box like ISO or inside zone. Okay, now we're going to get into the instructional components of this block, executing a base block versus a tight defender on inside runs. We want to talk about our footwork first and foremost from our stance. You've watched the three-point stance videos, you understand the basics there in our tip of the spear contact system library. Now let's talk about how we're going to put our body into relationship to be effective to do the things we're looking to do, which is to displace this defender who's aligned tight shade to us vertically, also have an opportunity to displace him laterally without getting penetration in the interior gaps or getting pushed back. So what we have to do is take some footwork. The first thing we're going to look at is the way we're aligned in our stance. Right now, I'm going to be I'm a left tackle, left guard, tight end on the left side. We have a stagger with our outside foot, which is the left foot, just for demonstration purposes. And you guys can see the stagger. The stagger will vary. The depth and width will vary based on player. But from this position here, what I am the key point I want to get at is that my hips are now pointed directly downfield. We want to align our hips in position with the optimal position in order to unload them on the defender with optimal force using our hands. Okay? In this position right now, as you can see, I'm totally square to the line of scrimmage. Even though I have a stagger, my shoulders and hips are pointed downfield directly. Well, in that position, I can't unload my hips anywhere but forward. What I want to do instead is I want to align my hips with the optimal position on the defender, which in this case is the inside ear. That's the best position for us to block a tight shade to prevent him from beating us inside and then also putting us in position to move him backward. So we're going to take a brace step. We also call it a bucket step. Coaches have called it a bucket step. It's the same thing. All we're going to do is we have to then take footwork, and this is our very first step in the sequential process for blocking a defender on a tight shade is our brace step. It's an open step, it's a drop step, okay? All we're doing is we want to open our hips up to achieve that relationship right down the inside ear of the defender, which is our first step again for executing the base block. In traditional blocking, like we talk about the drive block, we're trying to take a defender off the ball. A lot of times you'll see players, when coaches especially, they'll always talk about using your hips. Unfortunately, when we see that, if we use the hips, and a lot of players don't, it usually happens far after the point of initial contact. So maybe I'm driving John back, taking incremental steps to push him backward on that horizontal plane, and then at some point, maybe I bring my hips to the table. The difference between that technique and the technique we're teaching with force deflection is that we're going to try to incorporate our hips immediately. How quickly can I bring my hips to the party? I want to bring them now. That's sourcing all of our power. So the pop step is really what helps us do that. How quickly can I get that second step grounded? Making sure we have the instep grounded, right? We don't want to be on our toes. All the same principles apply. You've heard it by now 25,000 times. We want to make sure our feet are grounded or behind our body, our insteps are in the ground. It's going to give us a great chance to uncoil and fit with optimal power and control of the body. Whereas the brace step, we talk about the angle of our hips. The pop step is really the distance traveled is important. How far are we going to advance our foot? It's not far at all, as I mentioned. When you go too far with that pop step, again, we're susceptible to penetration when a crossface, because when we have that foot in front of us, I'm not nearly as strong as if I would be when I have my foot behind me. That allows me to use my hips most effectively. Okay. One way you can test this out with your players, really important, is that because again, I think you're going to see that most kids are going to be more inclined to take that longer second step, which is detrimental. So what we want to do is find that happy medium, and we can't not take a step. That's another point I want to mention. You'll see players do this, boom, and then they try to uncoil. But what happens, they end up kind of falling. We want to fire that foot, ground that foot with a second step, that pop step, and uncoil those hips simultaneously to the point where the foot grounds itself. Okay, that's how we're going to uncoil. That brings us to the fit position. Now we talk about the tip of the spear. What is that? That's our hands, right? We're talking about the bridge technique, taking a man off the ball, physically oppressive blocking, taking our head out, but using the good stuff. That's our hips to drive the force of the hands. When we're coming through, remember, we always want to keep our hands in front. In no time on the field, really, do we ever want to see our kids reaching back, grabbing six guns. Why? Because if I do that, as soon as I do that, what happens? Defender sticks his hands in my chest. It's happened to me. It's happened to a lot of people. And as we get better in advanced technique, around the game. You're not just seeing it at that NFL level, we're seeing it at the youth and high school levels, especially when guys are using the pillar technique. They're trying to stab us long to create that disruption, with the hands. So we can't afford to draw those hands back. It'll alter our timing and effectively compromise our technique. With the hands in the guard position, we're going to uncoil, we're going to teeter. We talk about teetering, all that stuff, remember? Our teetering, rocking forward, our knees go down and out, our hands are in front. And as we get into the fit, we're going to rotate our thumbs outward. Okay? What is that doing for us? It's actually drawing our elbows down and inward so we can get our elbows to a position where if you took a straw through the top and through the bottom, we want to see how close we can get that straw to look like a 90-degree vertical angle. That's our most powerful position. If you had to lift a boulder, you wouldn't want your elbows out. Any degree of elbow flare, as you know, will compromise strength. So we want to make sure we're engaging with the elbows pointed down, the thumbs pointed out. And one analogy we like is, imagine you're drinking out of a punch bowl. You're not holding the bowl like this. You're not holding the bowl like that. You have it at about a 45-degree angle so you can support the weight underneath and also support it laterally. Same exact thing when we're striking a defender, is we want to be able to not only control him vertically with the force deflection by lifting and elevating his upper spine, but also to control him laterally, which is important for control, especially on inside zone. Okay, so as you guys understand mechanics, like rotational force, we're getting some extra value by turning those thumbs out on the way up. Just like if you ever watch boxers, they don't just punch like this, they get rotation. Inward, the thumb rotates internally. We're gonna get external rotation here, the supination of the wrist, so the elbows are pointed up and down for more power. Let's talk about hand placement. Where do we want our hands to go? I hear the word or expression or term hand placement. Coaches hear about that. Get good hand placement. Well, everybody wants good hand placement, great hand placement. Where? Where is that optimal for what we're trying to do here, specific to inside runs? I wanna make sure, number one, that my inside hand is critical, okay? Critical. We're gonna come with both hands now. Both hands are going to strike, and what we want to try to nail is right under the ridge of the breastplate. And John, if you can turn here for the camera, if you can see this right here, this is very important, okay? I can get more bite on this guy if I can, because we're trying to lift, right? If I can catch his pads just underneath the ridge of the breastplate, underneath the nipple, with our thumb out, elbow pointed into the ground, okay? I can affect lift there and deflect force. So that's the hand placement we want, especially the inside hand, okay? Defenders are usually playing an outside gap. So in this case, John's a 3 technique, meaning, and I'm a left guard, meaning John has responsibility for retaining control of the B gap. So John is going to be inclined to play half a man from this position. John's inside hand will be in kind of down the center line of my midline, okay? His outside hand will be on my shoulder. What does that mean for me? I'm actually in a great position to land this inside strike, okay? Low to high, which is what we're going to do. With the tip of the spear in this position, that's critical to execute this block. And we're in good position to do that. He's giving that to us for the most part. So we're gonna come low to high, we're gonna strike him long, right? We're gonna have a slight elbow bend on the, as we deliver, and we're gonna come low to high with our hips, that's driving all the force, okay? But at the end of the day, the other hand is gonna strike too, but I'm trying to make sure you guys are really keying in on delivering and landing that inside hand. At least be conscious of it until it becomes second nature. Okay, now let's talk about how we're going to finish this guy off. How we're going to finish our block. That's the final chapter here for teaching a base block. There's a lot of ways to finish, okay? So you're going to see some fancy techniques as we continue down the path here or on our way to development for contact. But let's talk about the basic stuff, which really, if we can get everybody to do, it's going to look good. We want to finish the block by closing our hips. That's important. It's kind of counterintuitive. You'll see a lot of players, when I say closing the hips, once I'm engaged with John, as I've uncoiled my hips and I got movement, right? I've tucked my tail, I'm taking movement, right? We want to do it in tight steps. And that's the same exact thing that is true when we're trying to finish a block. Because what we can't have happen is if I take that long, greedy step, and this happens to all of us, trust me, especially guys out there, they start getting movement. This guy, I'm gonna take that long step. What happens to me? I get thrown, okay? I lose my base. How do we prevent that from happening? We take those tight steps. So what we wanna do is close our hips. And I understand this is completely counterintuitive. You think you got movement, you want to take greedy steps, advance him, but that's exactly where we get defeated and shed by defenders because we've just lost our base. That's most fundamental for us, our base. Maintaining a base throughout. We don't ever want to take long steps, lead steps, those kind of steps where we lose that base. So instead, what we're going to do to finish our block, our knees are going to go down and out, hips come through, I get movement, and I want to bring my hips to the defender's hips. How close can I get my hips to his hips? That's going to put me in a position of great control. At some point, yes, we will dip this guy, finish him, pancake him, what have you, especially when he tries to disengage and make a tackle. We're going to talk about some other finishing moves in other videos, but this is the ultimate finish right now. We want our kids to learn this. All players should learn this, how to close and finish. Because once I get my hips to his hips, I've elevated him to a point where he cannot defend himself. And I have many options from there.